The first foreign country I worked in was Uzbekistan, which is an unusual choice, I know, and I'll make a separate video about the reasons why I chose to go there. I ended up spending almost 2 years in Uzbekistan, and in this video I'll be talking about the first day that I was there, which was very eventful. I flew to Tashkent in early February of 2013. I didn't actually fly directly. It is possible to fly directly with the national carrier, Uzbekistan Airways. I actually chose a cheaper flight with Turkish Airlines, which meant that I had a 6-hour stopover in Istanbul, and it was 4 hours London to Istanbul, and then 4 hours from Istanbul to Tashkent. So in total, it was 14 hours London to Tashkent. And I can't sleep on planes. I've never been able to sleep on planes. So I was exceptionally tired when I arrived. And one of the first things that you have to do when you get there, I'd never travelled outside of Europe at this point, so I didn't know about this. You have to fill in a customs declaration saying about everything that you have with you, especially money. And then the next thing that I wasn't quite prepared for is when you come through the arrivals, the doors open up and you're coming through. There must have been at least 20 taxi drivers waiting there, all coming up to me and going, "Taxi, taxi," which was thoroughly annoying. Because I was going there for work, I was supposed to meet somebody from the school. And so I walked through the airport, stepped outside. The weather was very nice for February, it was quite warm. But I looked around and there was nobody waiting for me. And all this time the taxi drivers are still coming up to me and asking me if I want a taxi, to which I'm telling them in an increasingly frustrated tone, no, go away. And all this time I'm thinking, the guy isn't here. Does the school exist? Have I just made a massive mistake? Am I stranded in a country that I didn't know anything about? Fortunately, after about 20 minutes of this, the taxi drivers, seeing how increasingly frustrated I'm getting, one of them came over and offered me his phone in order for me to call somebody. Originally I didn't recognise that was his intention, so again I have to admit, in my frustrated state, I probably told him to go away. But once I realised that's what he was doing, I took the phone, I phoned the school, and the guy who was supposed to meet me told me he was on his way. He was just, he'd be there in a few minutes. So eventually he turned up and he was with a woman who worked for the school. She didn't speak any English at all, only Russian. But he more than made up for that. He was probably the most talkative person I've ever met. And that's really not what you want when you've been up for the whole night and the day before, and you really just want to sleep. But anyway, nice enough guy. So we got into the back of a larder. I've seen larders in the UK when I was a child. I don't believe that anybody still drives them. And certainly I'd seen them on shows like Top Gear, where they would make fun of them, and there were plenty of jokes about larders. But driving through the city, larders were everywhere. Everyone was driving a larder. Maybe not everyone, but a lot of people were driving Ladas, and they were all 20 to 30 years old. So we went to the apartment where I would be staying during my time in Uzbekistan, and that was also a shock to the system. I'm not sure what I expected exactly, but we walked in, and I think Soviet is the only word I can use to describe it. The decor was very Soviet. There were carpets on the walls, cockroaches in the kitchen, and also it was in an apartment block, and on the ground floor was a bank. And most of the locals found this hilarious, that I lived above a bank. I'm not really sure why. And I was living on the top floor. But for all of its faults, it was actually very centrally located. So I stayed there and slept for a couple of hours, probably just 1 or 2 hours. And then I got a call from them saying they were going to come and collect me, and we were going to go to the school. So we went to the school, and I met a few people who were going to be my colleagues. There was a woman who left a few days later. There was a guy who was there for maybe a few more months. But the introduction that I'll always remember was to a girl who later became my girlfriend. She was working on her computer, tapping away, and they said to her, "This is Alex," and she kind of went back to typing. And so yeah, love at first sight, definitely. And so after the school, we went to this Italian restaurant, Il Migliori, which I went to many times after this, actually. I've just had a look, and I believe it's still open, so anybody going to Tashkent, do drop in. And it was a very reasonably priced restaurant with decent standard of food. That evening I went to a place called the Irish pub, and Irish in this context seems to mean that some of the furniture was green, and there was a poster on the wall advertising Guinness, even though they didn't sell any Irish alcohol at all, just the local beer. I went there to meet a friend of mine who is Irish, and therefore the most Irish thing in that place. We actually shared a house together when I lived in the UK. So that's how I knew him, and that's part of the reason why I chose to go to Uzbekistan instead of somewhere else. But I'll make a separate video about that. And so he took me on a tour of the nightlife in Tashkent. We went to a couple of bars. There were a couple of house parties going on as well. So we went to, I think, both of those as well. I don't remember too much of that evening. I know I met a lot of people who, some of whom I never saw again, and some that I saw on a regular basis. I don't entirely remember how I got home. The important thing that I did get home safely, no problem. And what I do remember is getting up the next day in the afternoon, and I discovered that I was lying on my bed, fully dressed. And as I started to move around the flat, I noticed that I'd actually left my flat door open. I checked that nothing had been taken or moved or anything, and fortunately that hadn't happened. I think it's fortunate that I was actually staying on the top floor, so the only people that would have had any reason to come up to that floor would be my neighbours or their guests. So after that, I think I slept for a very long time. Yeah, so that was my first 24 hours in Tashkent. Quite a packed day. Fortunately, things were a little bit less eventful after that. If you enjoyed that video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.